Alli Muller.
That wasn't embarrassing at all. I'm going to read a nonfiction piece and just a little brief story about this on page 120. I'm not going to read all of it because it's long, but a brief story about that. I wrote it a year ago, and I've written pieces since then that were more like technically impressive. But I really loved this one because it was the one that the piece that got me writing nonfiction. Because before that, whenever a teacher would ask me to write nonfiction, I would lie because fiction was like my escape, and it made no sense to me since it was an escape to write about my life. And this just came out of me one day. It started out being about my eating disorder that I went through, and it ended up being about my parents. So I've never read it before without crying. So if I start to do that, just wait for me. Get it together. Okay, I'll start. All right. My mother never loved my father. She tells me so after they divorced, but she doesn't need to. Even if I hadn't been able to guess by their separate bedrooms or their indifferent interaction, I would have been able to break it down by numbers. My father was 30 when they married. My mother was 35. I read somewhere that at that age, a woman is more likely to get hit by a plane than she is to find a husband. And my mother desperately wanted children. Their marriage was closer to a business arrangement than a love match. I suppose I always assumed that their feelings were mutual, but a week after my mother interrupts me mid-frost on some strawberry cupcakes to tell me she's getting a divorce, my father turns to me as he drives down a darkened street with me riding shotgun and speaks over Zach Brown's Highway 20 ride. I want you to know I still love her, he says. An hour later, I lock myself in my room with my iPod, listen to the song, and cry. My mother dies a lot. I'm very young when I noticed this, and at first I didn't understand. She is the most beautiful woman in the world, so hearing her use the words fat and ugly to describe herself confuses me. When I ask my father about this, he shrugs. There's a refrigerator magnet on our white Kenmore. It's double-sided, wooden block, about the size of a 5-year-old girl's palm, with a chain made of tiny golden balls connecting it to another wooden block, like a tiny yellow brick road. The top block reads "Diet is," and the lower block is double-sided, with one side reading "on" and the other declaring the family diet is off. My brother and I spent hours flipping it from one side to another. It is one of our first toys. My mother talks about her weight a lot. She is always afraid people are making fun of her, that they are judging her because of her weight. When we see overweight people in restaurants, she leans over and asks in a quiet voice, "Am I that big?" And I always answer no, but the more she mentions it, the more I notice it. At age 9, I look in the mirror and see a fat, stupid blob with straw-colored hair and an ugly face. That day at a school pizza party, I throw my piece in a trash can. Mother is God in the eyes of a child. On Sunday, my mother and I, the piece jumps around a lot. My mother and I are driving home from church. I'm wearing a beige skirt and a black top with gold beads around the neckline. We are talking and laughing, and for once we're actually getting along. And I look at her and smile, thinking I've never been so happy. She starts to cry, and she's crying so hard I wonder how she can drive. Touching her shoulder, I ask her what is wrong and try to comfort her, but she's hysterical. Finally, I understand her. "You're so beautiful. You're so, so beautiful." Through choking sobs, she says this over and over again until we get home. A few weeks after my mother cries, my father pulls me into his bedroom and demands that I explain myself. He has noticed that I'm sad today and he wants to know why. I tell him that he will not understand and he gets upset. How can he not understand? He's my father. I want to explain, but I just start crying. I tell him that life is meaningless and that I'm worthless and I want to die because I won't be walking around feeling so empty. He gets angry and frustrated and argues with me for a long time before throwing up his hands and screaming, "You're right, I don't understand." After my mom tells us she's leaving, my dad and I sit on the back porch and smoke cigarettes. With a lukewarm Sam Adams in his hand, my father looks out of our overgrown backyard and shakes his head, saying it's a disaster. Nah, admiring the tall, proud weeds, I smile at him. It's like living in a jungle. "I should have done something about them years ago," he says genially. "I'm just a lazy son of a bitch." With a smile, he takes a swig of beer and adds, "It's probably why your mom is divorcing me." I don't know why, but my heart hurts, and even though we're outside, I suddenly need some air. When I get back from wherever I found an excuse to drive to, I see my father. As soon as I pull into the drive, I see him through the gaps of our cricket fence and the holes in his rotten wood. He is in the backyard with a dumpster, a pair of gloves, and 6 plastic trash bags. He is pulling up the weeds. About halfway through my senior year, my father notices gashes on my arms. He yells at me in front of my brother, and afterwards he and my mom fight. I hunch down in the hallway and listen to my dad yelling. I can't hear everything, but I hear him saying he's fed up, that he doesn't want me living in his house marking up my arms. It's not right, my father yells. It's not right to you and to me for her to be doing that. My father's voice is soft, so soft I can't make out everything she's saying. But I hear one sentence that burns into me from the distance. Sometimes you hurt so much on the inside that you have to hurt on the outside. She is speaking from the wisdom that comes from experience, from the perspective of someone who has suffered and the strength of someone who has survived. But I didn't learn that until later. Though I will never forget my mother's words that night, my father, it seems, did not hear them. He just keeps yelling. My father may not understand me, but I understand him. He is a man uncomfortable with emotion, a man who abhors any trace of weakness as a hated enemy to be cut down. For these reasons, I fear a part of him may hate me for sinning against him in this way, for breaking the family code of covered wounds and silent agony. But more than that, I think he hates me because he's finally realized that no matter what you do, you can't make someone want to live. He sees me drowning, and he has lost his breath trying to convince me to save myself. Standing at the other side of the wind-tossed waves, he can only watch as I sink under, his arms reaching but never taking hold. Futility, that is what I represent. Later, I'm lying on my friend Denise's bed, and she traces her fingers on my scars. This right here, she says, tracing her fingers at the patterns, this is the darkness. You can't go into the darkness, Allison.